Another month of Premier League football is over, so let's look at 5 things we can take from the games that we saw this month. This is the Premier League roundup for October. Beginning then with the first point, and that is the improvement we've seen from Southampton. 3 wins, 1 draw, 11 goals and 6 conceded throughout the matches in October that they had. I made a whole video back in August talking about Southampton and how Ralph Hasenhuttl has been able to change the team at Southampton, playing a lot better, high pressing, and in the second half of last season their form drastically improved. And of course, as said in that video, it's okay doing it last season, but can they continue that? Can they bring it into this season? Like, they lost their first 2 games, however, from that, as I said, 3 wins, 1 draw, 11 goals and 6 conceded is very impressive. Most importantly for them and how they've got their wins is through Danny Ings, his goal scoring form. Carrying on from last season, he's already been able to score 5 goals, but unfortunately for Southampton and him, he has picked up an injury now, so he might be out for a few games. I'm not too sure what the situation is on that. But a big thing which I talked about in the video, and a main point of why I made that video, was to talk about the partnership of Danny Ings and Che Adams. Adams started to score a few towards the end of last season and showed why Southampton did sign him, and when you then put him alongside Danny Ings, who's a pure goal scorer, you can see how this partnership could work. And now, after 7 games this season, it's starting to show how it could work. Adams has got 2 assists and they're both for Danny Ings, and then Danny Ings has got 2 assists and 1 was for a Che Adams goal. Before this month, we did see how their high line can be suspect, and this is where some bad results could come from. Also to note, if you did watch that video back in August, then you'll know a bit more about their high pressing system and the players that were high up in the Premier League for pressures. In terms of ranking for pressures, Southampton had many players in the top 20. However, so far this season, it seems that their pressing maybe hasn't been as relentless statistically. There isn't any Southampton players in the top 10 for pressures attempted. Ings is 12th and then Romeo is 30th. I don't feel like they exactly miss him that much, but obviously Højbjerg left for Tottenham and he was a player doing this a lot. If you do want to find out more about Southampton's system and the way that they play, then be sure to check out that video back in August. Next up then, let's move on to the second point from October, and this one is about West Ham, and I think it's fair to say that they have really proved us all wrong. When Premier League fixtures do come out, you look at certain things, and one of those things is teams' start to the season. How hard is their first few games? And well, West Ham's couldn't really get any harder. And I start with Newcastle, but then they had Arsenal, Wolves, Leicester, Tottenham, Man City and Liverpool. A ridiculously hard start, so people were tipping West Ham to be in the bottom 3 after these first few games. Now, however, 8 points, they currently sit 14th, won 2, drawn 2 and lost 3, and throughout those 7 games they've been able to score 13 goals. Now, you'd think looking at those fixtures that the Newcastle game would have been a certain win, and that's obviously where they've picked up 3 of their 8 points, but no, they did lose 2-0 in that opening day fixture. What they've shown in these games is a bit of fight, a bit of determination, especially against Tottenham when they were 3-0 down and they came back to draw 3-3. For me, West Ham have always been a team that I've looked at and thought, there's a lot of goals in this game, you can score a lot of goals against West Ham. They've never had a solid defence. And okay, they still let in 3 goals against Tottenham, but something else they haven't shown is the drive to come back from that and score a lot of goals. Helping them score those goals is Antonio, who, in my opinion, is the most underrated player in the Premier League. I really like Antonio, and when he joined West Ham from Nottingham Forest, where I knew about him, I was excited to see him, and he was always then just a rotation player. But I'm so glad now he's starting to get more game time, and people are seeing the kind of player that he is. 3 goals in 6 games, but unfortunately now he is out for a month, so he's going to be a huge miss. Coming in for him then, while he's out, is Sebastian Haller, someone who I was really excited to see in the Premier League. He came in and played their last game, but he didn't look like a threat at all. Whether this is down to the player and he can only play a certain way, or the manager just doesn't know how to get the best out of him, I'm not too sure on the situation specifically. I'd love to see him start scoring, but at the moment, seeing his performances, it doesn't look too likely. Someone who is putting in good performances is Thomas Soucek, and in the words of Jose Mourinho, he is David Moyes' new Marouane Fellaini. And I think this is an accurate comparison. Soucek does a lot of the same sort of things as Fellaini used to, getting into the box and using his height to his advantage. From corners, West Ham are a threat with Soucek in the box and Cresswell putting in the delivery. Cresswell usually a left back, but he's been playing left side as centre back. At left back they've had Masuaku, and Masuaku's a player who hasn't exactly solidified their place in the first team. However, this season he has, and for good reason too. He's had the most shot creating actions for West Ham so far, providing a good attacking threat at left wing back. So far, only 1 assist to his name, however, I'd expect more in the coming months. As said before, in previous seasons, West Ham have been known for leaking goals, however, now it seems a bit different with the back 5. In midfield as well, and they've been able to keep hold of Declan Rice. They seem to have got something, they've got a good squad together, however now, it's the big thing, can they do it against the so-called easier sides? This is where we can really see, can West Ham possibly challenge for a top half finish? It would take a lot, however, from what we've seen so far against some of these big sides and putting in some competitive performances, I wouldn't write it off. Moving on to point number 3, and this is in the topic of Tottenham, and that's because so far, Harry Kane and Heung-min Son have almost been telepathic. Already in the Premier League, 7 times Harry Kane has assisted for Son, and Son has assisted for Kane twice. An incredible goal-scoring link-up, and without them, I don't think Tottenham would be third. The two players have really been instrumental to Tottenham's good start to the season. Tottenham have scored 18 goals, which is the most in the Premier League so far, but it's weird because you'd think on paper that Son is the creator, a mobile player, and Kane is the goal scorer. Now, however, Kane is using his strength to his advantage and holding up the ball, looking for passes for Son, and it clearly makes sense for the team because it's working so well. Saying about Antonio earlier, and he's underrated, I think Son is also a little bit underrated. He's so fast and so clinical with his chances. Any team coming up against Tottenham at the minute will be scared of these two players. It's a deadly duo. Son is a perfect example of a shrewd signing from Tottenham. He was signed as a player that not too many people would have known before Tottenham, but since his arrival under Pochettino and now under Mourinho, he's developed fantastically. Next up for them is West Brom. They could have a field day against them. Then after that, Manchester City, Chelsea in November, and then Arsenal to start off December. Some really tough games that will test Tottenham. We'll see what kind of team they are. And I guess the real question is how many will Kane and Son score, not if they will. The fourth point then, and we can sort of relate this to Tottenham, is that this is somebody's league to take. Last season was completely different in the way that we saw Liverpool storm away and it was theirs to lose, but it's definitely a bit more open this year. Even though we've seen Liverpool lose 7-2 to Aston Villa, they do lead at the minute, but definitely not the same side. They've conceded 15 goals. That's the second worst in the Premier League. West Brom only worse than Liverpool, and they are now without Van Dijk. We just discussed Tottenham, they're up there as a contender. Not sure if they really can win it. The same with Leicester, they're right up there. Last season, they only dropped out the top 4 because of a terrible run of form, and I can't see that repeating. So far, the other teams you'd expect to be up there, Man City currently sitting 10th, but with a game in hand, if they win that, they would go 4th. So of course, they're still a contender, but then when you look at other teams, I just can't see them really winning the league, like Chelsea, Arsenal. They're both inconsistent at the moment. Along with Everton, everyone was looking at their team after the first few games and seeing the team that they've put together. It's really strong. However, when those players drop out, we're now seeing the inconsistencies come through. But because of the inconsistencies, that is exactly the point we're making here. If someone puts a good run of form together, they're going to go right up the table. And if we're not talking about the league title, then for sure there is European spots here to take. In the last roundup, I said it's going to be another unpredictable season, and that is exactly the same with the league winner. It's unpredictable at the moment. Then the fifth point here, and please listen before you think I'm crazy talking about Fulham in this way, but there is glimpses of excitement at Fulham. I recently did my video on Fulham and talked about them in a little bit more detail, and I know they're not the most interesting team, however their squad now has some players that do intrigue me. Their lineup in the last game against West Brom only had 3 players from last season's championship squad. A lot of their team is new now. Even when you look back to the first game of the season, I'm sure there's a lot of players in there that weren't in that team. And really who we're talking about here is the new left winger, Ademola Lookman, on loan from RB Leipzig. And I mentioned him in my video. There was a little rumour going around that he would join, and then he did, and so far in the team he's looked really good. The flair and unpredictability is exactly what they needed to add. And we can see from the statistics he's been really impressive. Per 90 so far, 4.9 successful dribbles. Only Adama Traore has more with 6.7 per 90. 2.5 key passes per 90 is 13th in the Premier League. This is exactly what they were crying out for. Another player I talked about a lot in that video was Anguissa, and he's proved exactly what we questioned. Can he do it in the Premier League? And while he can for sure, he's had the most successful dribbles in the Premier League, and he's a central midfielder. We said about how he loves to get the ball from deep and then run up the pitch with the ball. We saw that he did this a lot in the Spanish league. Could he do it in England? Well, yeah, he's doing exactly that. He's 10th for the most progressive distance on the ball, 1,259 yards. This shows that he is getting the ball from deep areas and taking it up the pitch, giving Fulham exactly what they needed, which was to get rid of that slow tempo that they had, quicken up their game a bit and have a bit of confidence to take on players. Anguissa loves doing that. Also in the midfield, Mario Lemina looked confident and he had signs of quality in the last game, keeping a clean sheet in their last game, something people never thought they'd see a Fulham team be able to do in the Premier League. But the defence and the goalkeeper is all new. new. I'm also happy for Anthony Robinson. Obviously he missed out on his AC Milan move, however now at Fulham he was in the team against West Brom as a starter, and he provided a great cross for Mitrovic right into the box. Mitrovic headed it down for Reed, and that's how they scored a goal. That wraps it up for October. As always, get involved in the comments with your thoughts on these Premier League topics. I recommend that you don't miss out on future videos. Subscribe to Route 1 and like the video if you did enjoy.